let light increase. It always is a matter of letting it be so. No struggle, no human effort. The increase of light permits the increase of vision. There certainly is need for that increase of vision. Without vision, the people perish. But the increase of light is the increase of creative power by which essential changes are wrought so that all might be included in the creative processes of restoration. Individually, we have the ability to let the light shine and increase in its shining. Because responsibility is taken for one's world. It might be useful to consider something in this connection which relates to the dissolution of the veil of human nature so that the light might increase. This morning we were considering again the matter of judgment. We may be inclined to think of this in terms of our association with other people and circumstances. I trust we do think of it that way and are exercised in the matter of relinquishing judgment, one of another and of our circumstances. This is essential if the light is to shine. When we speak of these things, the elementary ABC, it means little until it becomes specific in our living experience. We're all experts, I'm sure, in describing what is necessary. We can all talk at length about it. But here is the road to failure. Unless we specifically see the fact of our own specific judgments in daily experience. So there is much to be looked at, which is brought to us moment by moment. We don't have to go searching for it. Because anything that is brought to you will, according to old habits, be judged. But anything that comes, whatever it may be, and it will come in specific ways, day by day, is there to determine as to whether one still is in the kindergarten capacity learning ABC. Presumably when we learn that, we can go on to higher learning. But if we don't know our ABCs, we're stuck in kindergarten. And I'm sure no one is anxious to spend the rest of their days in kindergarten. No wonder things seem so dull and routine-like if one has never gotten out of kindergarten. Of course, to a young child first going in, that's very exciting. And I'm sure entering into the experience of life on earth seemed back along the way to be a very exciting thing. But then somehow or other we got sidetracked, never having learned our ABCs. So the excitement tends to pall, and we have to hype it up somehow. At least this is the usual human view. As I mentioned this morning, matters of danger that excite people. They do all sorts of crazy things because it's dangerous. And they get a thrill out of it. That is, if they survive. That's a very unnatural state of affairs and gives no indication of the true fulfillment that may be known once judgment is left behind. As human beings, we all fell pretty low. Many people talk about the fall, and it's a fact. We got down into the muck and the mire where we don't belong. We find ourselves somewhat stuck in the muck and the mire, wondering how to get out of it. And this is a common experience to many people. They'd like to shake it off somehow, but cannot do so because of their own attitudes of judgment. That keeps them at the level where they don't belong. What was it that brought people to that level? The eating of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the tree of judgment. And this is done in very specific ways. And we have to meet those specific ways and let them clear, so that when something comes to us and the habit of judgment arises, we are there consciously to deal with this event. It may be a jerky experience to start with. We have to stop and say, no, I shouldn't be judging here. It doesn't matter how justified I am in the reasons for this judgment. It is the judgment itself that keeps me embedded in this fallen condition. Why should one try to justify oneself for staying in the fallen condition? That seems rather foolish. But every time one justifies one's judgments, one is doing that. Taking another lease on the fallen condition and staying where one doesn't belong. Now, there are many implications to this. We necessarily think of it in terms of our daily experience. But there are many background factors that are present with us that also hold us from coming clear so that we may rise above this human condition. I was thinking a little about our use of the Bible, and particularly of that portion of the Bible which purportedly describes to us the Master's presence and experience on earth. We have something here which has come alive for us so that it is no longer merely a story in a book. It has come alive to a certain degree. Christians talk about Jesus Christ. We may speak of our King. When it comes right down to it, what's the difference? There is a character described here in the Gospels. This is a story. No one really knows where it came from. There has been a certain amount of effort to find what might be referred to as the historical Jesus rather than the Jesus of the Gospels. I think it is fairly safe to say that no one has been very successful in this. Many ideas have been put forward as to the nature of the Jesus of the Gospels. Where did this character come from? Was it a real character? If you're trying to make it so by looking at the form of things, you will come up with an image. And human beings obviously have come up with an image. I'm thinking of this particularly in the Christian world, and I suppose most of us have had some sort of a background of Christianity, certainly from the standpoint of heredity in many ways. Of generations and generations of people who read this story in the Bible and assumed that it was true and that it had reference to some certain particular character. However, as I say, when you start looking for that character, historically speaking, you don't find him. There are those who've postulated the idea that the Jesus of the Gospels was invented out of the characters of certain historical personages, maybe a couple of them or more. Well, someone was quite bright, evidently, in doing this. And, of course, it is true that the Jesus of the Gospels largely supports the building of the Christian church. So presumably the things that are there were there because they did support this human effort. More recently, of course, there have been what are called the Dead Sea Scrolls, which have described another character. No doubt there has been a suppression back along the way of certain aspects of what it was that appeared on earth in order to make possible the building of the doctrine of Christianity. This is not exceptional, mind you. You can look into this from the standpoint of other religions too. But all I'm saying here is that insofar as we are concerned, we have seen Jesus very largely through the eyes of the Gospels. However, we've seen something which went beyond that, because there has been some sort of a living experience, something that we have had in experience ourselves, which transcends the form. We don't need the form, really, to tell us what the experience is. It's something that springs forth into expression in our living, if we will let it. Let the light shine. The idea has been, for the most part, in the Christian world at least, look at the light. The light was Jesus, Jesus of the Gospels. The statement has been made a number of times that all history is fiction. Are we to exclude this? We've all, I'm sure, established images in consciousness relative to Jesus. Now, there are those who not only establish them in consciousness, but let them come out in the form of wood or stone or the painting of a picture or whatever. Is there anything much different between having an image in consciousness and letting that image externalize itself in some artistic expression? You have to have the image in consciousness first. And I think virtually everyone has had the image in consciousness. An image which is largely based in the story of the Gospels. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. Oh, well, we didn't get around to doing it in stone or in wood or painting a picture. Well, I don't know. Some have painted pictures of the image they had in consciousness. But everybody had the image in consciousness in whatever measure and whatever it seemed to be. I'm suggesting that this must be relinquished. It must dissolve. We find ourselves in a situation somewhat like what was spoken of in the story when Mary Magdalene was in the garden, again according to the story, and couldn't find the body of Jesus. And there was someone there she questioned. They have taken away my Lord, and I know not where they have laid him. I would suggest that everybody needs to come to that point. Here is an image which people cling to. It's very precious to them. We have stories in the Old Testament about people who had very precious images. One lady sat on them in her tent. But one cannot experience the truth if one clings to an image, even the image of Jesus. How can the truth be known then? Well, we are aware of the way, but fundamentally, it is taking the same position in one's own world as Jesus was purported to have done in his. That's the only way you could find out what the truth is. There are those, perhaps, who have tried in various ways to get back 2,000 years to the events of that day, but no one was very successful in that. This in order to find out what it was that really happened. We don't need to go back there, because all that is real is here now. The truth can be known now. An aspect of judgment is this business of setting up an image. Thou shalt not make unto thee an image or a likeness of anything, even in the heaven above. Certainly not in the earth beneath. Everybody's done that. Everybody has worshipped their external idols. And been largely governed by the water, what is present in the water under the earth. In other words, the subconscious elements that come out of the past through heredity and in various ways. But there has been a deliberate setting up of an image relative to Jesus Christ in the Christian world, and other images in various ways in other religious doctrines. And the view is, there is the light. The image gives the light. One may feel rather self-righteous by reason of the fact that one may not have externalized one's image. But you still have it. If you're an artist, perhaps you could externalize it. And there are people, of course, who seek to externalize it in their living. This would require a very, very good person if we are considering the Jesus of the Gospels. A lot of people don't like that idea too much because they think it might end in crucifixion anyway. It isn't a matter of trying to imitate Jesus according to one's image of him. Immense numbers of people have endeavored to do this, to make a facsimile of Jesus. What blasphemy. The only way to discover what the truth is to be it. And you can't be it if you think it's over there somewhere. Even if it's over there simply in consciousness. So there is something to be relinquished here simply because one assumes the responsibility of standing in the place where we have an awareness he stood relative to the world. It is said in the gospel that he wasn't sent into the world to condemn the world. Well, we weren't sent into the world to condemn the world. That's a pretty straightforward statement. Certainly, in order to condemn the world, we'd have to judge it, presumably, first. And then, having satisfied ourselves with our judgment, we could hand out the sentence. Condemn the world. Condemn people. Involvement with ABC. Let it dissolve, that we may relinquish the image and accept the responsibility. The image has always been valuable to people because it helped them to feel right about not accepting the responsibility. If one can have an image to worship, well, provided that image is at the very peak, and in the Christian world that would be Jesus Christ, presumably, then one doesn't need to assume the responsibility that he, even in the story, suggested that we should. As long as we have an image, there is something separate from us, and we remain in the identity of human nature. Human nature identity is the identity that is separate from the truth. And if we see an image, obviously we have an identity still which is separate from the truth. So I think it is well due that we should realize that they have taken away my Lord, and I know not where they have laid him. We don't need to know. Because each individual assumes the responsibility of being the truth. Nobody can ever assume that responsibility and identity as long as the human nature identity persists. So clearly one must come to that point somewhere along the line. I think most of us have been sidling up to it a little. But the truth is now, it's not in the past. It's not in any image that we could create in consciousness. There are those who've tried desperately to do this. They've read the Bible with such care and application, seeking to find that truth. Well, of course, it isn't there. The truth is here. The truth is in the individual himself or herself. And only when it comes out can he know it, or she know it. Let the light increase.
Martin, what is being taken away is the graven image and not the Lord. Surely this is the greatest thing that has ever happened. And at this time of year when a lie is celebrated, and we can actually say that and not be struck dead, and maybe the crucifixion and the ascension, all of this has been perpetrated deliberately so that the monstrous hoax that has covered the face of the earth has allowed this thing to grow on earth that is called the body of man and the world. And I thank God that the Word is invisible. The Word is here. Thank God it has remained and is here. And we know that Word. But we are not afraid to call a lie. And it can only find flesh and be clothed by each one of us as that form is allowed to dissolve. And I thank God for this.
Each individual may say for him or herself, I only can know the truth for myself. And one knows the truth for oneself when one assumes the stance exactly where the truth is. We come to this particular season of the year which emphasizes the possibility of being the truth. This is not the usual emphasis. The truth was over there somewhere. In the past, a little baby. Oh, how delightful, how romantic, how precious. A precious image. And that precious image comes out, takes form, doesn't it? Usually through children who are inveigled into this. It may be all right for a child but adults have been trapped in a lie, worshiping a lie, never accepting the responsibility to be the truth and therefore know it. It is presumed that someone else knows the truth or knew the truth. In this instance, Jesus. Therefore, he can tell me the truth. He can acquaint me with the truth. Never. The human identity can never know the truth. Because the human identity is a lie in the first place. But we can relinquish that lie and accept the responsibility for our worlds individually in exactly the same way that we have discovered through association with the experience of it that whoever Jesus was did. But we're not concerned with that now. We're concerned with this now. And what is done now. What I do now. Where my identity is now. And if it is still human nature identity, I will judge. I will condemn. I will justify this stand because it supports my human identity. That it is necessary to come to the point where there's no concern in relinquishing the human identity. Somewhere along the way, the human identity is forcibly relinquished. At that point, there's no means of preventing it. But it may be done now because the assumption of the identity of the truth is assumed. I was not sent into the world to condemn the world, but that the world, through me, might be saved. Not through half a dozen other people, but through me. Of course, the human view then would say, well, that's arrogance. No, it requires the utmost humility. The complete relinquishment of one's human identity. Now, have we not been moving toward this point? Is it a point ever to be reached, do you think? Or is it just always a little over the horizon? We see these things because there has been some experience of them. We've been associated in letting the light shine, at least to some extent. And so we begin to know. But finally we cease our reluctance and stand where we belong. As individuals. Not looking to someone else to do it. To the extent that we do take a stand, we may know that others will do it, and that we find ourselves together as one in one body, with one mind and one heart. It isn't quite that way yet, is it? What have we been doing? Let the light increase. In me. Because I assume the responsibility of letting it be so.